Bricks. The flames had voices. That was the first thing Clara Whitmore remembered. Not the heat, not the screaming, not even the hands that shoved her backward into the burning wall of her own home. Bricks. It was the voices inside the fire, roaring and crackling like something ancient and hungry, as if the earth itself had decided it was done with her. Bricks. She had been 19 years old for exactly 3 days. Her husband, Edmund Whitmore, had celebrated her birthday by drinking himself into a fury over a cold supper. The beef had been tough. Bricks. The bread had been stale. And Clara, poor, trembling Clara, who had learned early that smallness was survival, had made the grave mistake of apologizing instead of begging. Bricks. Edmund did not like apologies. He liked fear. Bricks. So he had taken the lamp from the table, looked at her with those flat gray eyes that had never once held warmth, and said very quietly, "Then burn with it." The cabin went up fast. Bricks. Dry timber, dry summer, dry marriage, everything reduced to ash and ruin in minutes. Bricks. Clara had clawed her way out through the back window, her dress already catching, her forearms scorched raw from wrist to elbow. Bricks. She rolled in the dirt the way her father had once told her to. Drop and roll. Girl, fire needs air. And she beat the flames from her skirts with bleeding hands. Then she ran. Bricks. She ran because Edmund was standing at the front of the burning cabin watching it go, and he had not looked for her. He had not called her name. Bricks. He had simply stood there with his bottle and watched his property burn, already calculating, Clara was certain, what he would tell the sheriff. She was inside. Tragic. A good woman, my Clara. Bricks. She ran into the dark tree line of the Montana wilderness with nothing. No shoes, no coat, no direction, no name that meant safety. The burn on her arm wept openly. Bricks. Her feet found every sharp stone in the darkness. And the night, vast and indifferent, swallowed her whole. By the time the sun rose, she had stopped running, not because she had found safety, Bricks, but because her legs had simply given out beneath her the way a candle gives out. All at once, without ceremony, and she had fallen at the edge of a meadow she did not recognize, in a territory she, Bricks, had never been permitted to learn, and she lay there in the tall grass with the blue sky opening above her like a door to somewhere she would never reach. Bricks. This is where I die, she thought, without much feeling about it. She had thought it before. Chayton did not believe in accidents. Bricks. His grandmother had taught him this before she died, that the world was sewn together with invisible thread, and what looked like chance was only pattern you hadn't learned to read yet. Bricks. A hawk circling twice over the same ridge, a river running backwards after a storm. Bricks. A woman lying motionless in the tall grass of the eastern meadow at dawn, one arm raised toward the sky as if asking a question of it. He had ridden out alone that morning, which was itself unusual. Bricks. As chief of his band, he was rarely without his men beside him. Bricks. But something had pulled at him in the gray pre-dawn hours, some restlessness that sat behind his sternum like a held breath, and he had saddled his horse quietly and ridden east while his camp, Bricks, still slept. He smelled the burn before he saw her. Not wood smoke, he knew wood smoke. Bricks. This was the particular, sickening scent of scorched skin, the smell that lived in the memory of every warrior who had seen a fire taken to a village. Bricks. His horse felt it too and shifted beneath him, ears flat, nostrils wide. Chayton dismounted. Bricks. He approached her the way he approached wounded things, slowly, without the sound of intention, giving whatever lay in the grass the chance to know he was coming before he arrived. Bricks. He circled wide to come at her from the front, not the back, so she could see him if she woke. She did not wake. She was white. That registered, though it was not the first thing he saw. Bricks. The first thing he saw was the arm. Bricks. From wrist to elbow, the skin had been destroyed and remade into something terrible, weeping and raw, already beginning to mottle at the edges with the yellow tinge of deep damage. Bricks. The second thing he saw was her face. Young, very young, the youth almost obscured by a split lip long-healed and a cheekbone that had been broken and set badly, leaving a slight asymmetry that no Bricks fall from a horse had ever caused. He crouched beside her and pressed 2 fingers to the pulse point at her throat. Alive. Bricks. Thin and fast and frightened even in unconsciousness, like a rabbit's heartbeat, but alive. He looked at the burn again. He looked at the broken cheekbone. Bricks. He looked at the bare feet, cut and swollen, that told him she had run a great distance in the dark. Chayton had seen many things in his 32 years. Bricks. He had seen war and drought and the slow, grinding diminishment of his people's world at the hands of men who looked like this woman. Bricks. He had reasons, good, blood-soaked reasons, to leave her where she lay and ride back to his camp. He sat with those reasons for a long moment. Bricks. Then he took off his outer robe, wrapped it carefully around her without touching the burned arm, lifted her as gently as he knew how, and settled her across his horse in front of him. Bricks. His grandmother had been right about pattern. He just hadn't expected the pattern to be this. She woke to the smell of sage. Bricks. Clara's first instinct, before thought, before sight, before any understanding of where she was to make herself small. Bricks. She pulled her knees toward her chest and pressed her back against whatever was behind her and went very still, the way she had learned to go still in the dark hours of her marriage when Edmund came. Bricks. Home late and loud. Be nowhere, be less than air. You are safe. The voice was low and unhurried, the English careful and precise, each word placed like a stone in a stream. Bricks. Clara's eyes opened. She was inside a tipi. Bricks. Warm, genuinely warm. A warmth that had nothing to do with fire and everything to do with careful tending. A small contained heat source in the corner in robes beneath her and over her that smelled, Bricks, of cedar and clean animal hide. Late afternoon light came through the smoke hole above in a long golden column. Bricks. The man sitting across from her was watching her with dark, still eyes that reminded her of deep water. Not cold, exactly, but unfathomable. Bricks. He was broad through the shoulders, somewhere in his 30s, with the kind of face that had been weathered into its final form by years of outdoor life. Bricks. He held a bowl in both hands and made no move toward her. Where? Her voice cracked from disuse and dehydration. My camp, 2 hours east of where I found you. He extended the bowl slightly. Bruh. Bricks. You should drink before you try to speak. Clara looked at the bowl, then at him. Bricks. Then at her arm, which had been dressed with something, clean cloth wrappings, some kind of poultice beneath that smelled herbal and cool. You wrapped my arm, she said. My medicine woman did. Bricks. She has gone to sleep. She says the burn is serious, but will not kill you if you drink and rest, and do not tear the dressing. Clara stared at the wrapping. No one had ever wrapped her wounds before. Bricks. When Edmund's temper left marks, she had pressed rags to them alone in the kitchen and told herself it was ordinary. Bricks. When she had burned her hand on the stove 3 winters ago, she had packed it in snow and kept working because supper did not cook itself. Bricks. She realized she was about to cry, which was humiliating, and pressed the feeling back down into the familiar dark place she kept such things. Why did you help me? She asked instead. Bricks. He considered the question with more seriousness than she expected. Most men, in her experience, answered questions about their own goodness with impatience or deflection. Bricks. This man seemed to actually be thinking about it. Because you were there, he said finally, and I was there, and you were dying. He paused. I am Chayton, chief of this band. Bricks. You are in my camp and under my protection. No one here will harm you. No one here will harm you. Clara had been married for 2 years. Bricks. She had lived in her father's house for 17 years before that. She had never once, in all of her 19 years, been told by anyone with the power to enforce it that no one would harm her. Bricks. She took the bowl with her good hand. She drank. Bricks. And in the long, careful silence of the teepee, with the sage smell and the cedar warmth and the unfathomable dark eyes watching her with nothing in them that looked like hunger or threat, Clara, Bricks. Whitmore felt something shift in her chest. Some ancient clenched thing she had held so long she'd forgotten it wasn't part of her skeleton. She did not have a word for what it was. Bricks. She would learn one later. Peace. Chayton told himself it was practical. Bricks. She could not travel yet. The burn needed 5 days minimum before she could sit a horse without risk of the dressing splitting, and she had no horse anyway, and no destination, and the territory, Bricks. Between his camp and the nearest white settlement was 60 miles of open land that a woman alone with a healing arm and no shoes would not survive. He had pulled her out of one death. Bricks. It would be wasteful to deposit her into another, so she stayed. This was practical. Bricks. His people received the information about the white woman in his tipi with the varying degrees of enthusiasm he had anticipated, which was to say, his second, Lakota, said nothing but looked at him. Bricks. for a long time with an expression that communicated several paragraphs of concern. The medicine woman, old Winona, said only she's small for someone carrying that much weight, and went back to her work, and the children were simply delighted because they were children, and the world was still interesting to them. Clara herself moved through the camp on her fourth day, like a creature testing the edges of a new territory, cautious, watchful, stopping often to reassure herself of the exits. She had been given moccasins and a borrowed dress, and she wore both with the expression of someone who expected them to be taken back. Chayton watched her without appearing to watch her. This was a skill he had developed over many years of leadership, the ability to hold the full picture of a space in his peripheral vision while seeming to look at something else entirely. What he noticed. She startled at loud sounds. She made herself small when any man walked past her. She thanked people with a fervor that suggested she had rarely been thanked herself and had decided to compensate for the world's deficit. She spent a long time each morning simply sitting in the sun with her eyes closed and her burned arm resting in her lap, breathing. He did not know what she had survived before the fire. He could guess at the shape of it. On the fifth day, he brought her a horse. Not the best horse, that would have been strange, but a good, steady mare, gray with age and temperament, who would stand calmly if Clara needed time to mount. "You will be well enough to travel soon," he said. "When you are ready, I will send 2 of my men to take you to Millhaven. It is the nearest town." Clara looked at the horse, then at him. Something moved across her face that he couldn't quite read. "What will you tell them?" she asked. "The men you send with me." "What will they say when we arrive?" "I will tell them to see you safely to the town and to give you this." He held out a small leather pouch. "Coins, a fair amount, enough for a room and food, and time enough to think. The rest is your story to tell as you choose." She stared at the pouch for a long moment. "You don't want anything," she said. It was not quite a question. "I want you to be well," he said. "That is all." Clara Whitmore, who had grown up in a world where every kindness had a price attached beneath it, where every hand extended eventually closed into something that took, stood very still, in the morning light of a Lakota camp, and looked at a chief who had pulled her from a meadow where she was dying, and dressed her wounds, and fed her broth, and given her moccasins, and asked for absolutely nothing in return. She had no framework for this. It fit nothing she had ever been taught about men, or the world, or what she was worth in it. "I don't know how to go back," she said quietly, and she did not mean to Millhaven. Chayton looked at her for a long moment. "Then don't," he said. "Not yet." He turned and walked back toward the camp, and he told himself, again firmly, that this was practical. He was becoming a less convincing liar.